Now let's shift the gear, and I want to come to you, Dan, and maybe speak about Israel. And eventually, when we speak about the greater Middle East, there are two democracies in the greater Middle East. This is Armenia and Israel, on different terms, on different, let's say, alliances and whatever. But there is a very interesting dynamics which happens Israel and Turkey, Israel and India, Israel and Azerbaijan. If you can elaborate from your perspective, I mean, where things are going with Israel in all these possible alliances, and where there is no simple like friend of my friend is also my friend, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's much more complicated. And at the end, maybe you can also elaborate, and I know this is a difficult subject, but let's say special Azerbaijan relations of Israel, and how we can partition Armenia-Israel relations and nurture and develop despite all the depth of the relations between Israel and Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Yeah, boy, it's complicated. Yeah, it's more than the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's two-dimensional. Israel and is so complicated. It plays seven-dimensional chess and sometimes confuses itself. I I think one thing we really need to keep in mind is that there's more than one Israel, and the current government does not really represent neither public opinion nor certainly the position of the classic Israeli security establishment and the classic Israeli diplomatic establishment, which doesn't mean that those are more real, because it did get somehow sort of kind of elected, the current government. But it could be gone in a year, and there's a very wide beta of possibilities, wide range of possibilities of what Israel would do depending on the political leadership. Um, that said, certain common themes do apply. Broadly, Israel is focused on three goals: countering Iran and its proxies, which it sees as a critical strategic and existential threat, basically. Securing access to energy and trade routes, that's not so original. And diversifying its diplomatic and defense partnerships beyond the West, which is a particular priority for the current government, because the complications with the Palestinians make problems for them mainly in the West. So that increases the need for diversification. And in that context, in different ways, the three relationships you mentioned are important and certainly interesting. With Turkey, I'll lead up to Azerbaijan. With Turkey, the relationship is complex, despite years of great tension because of the nature of the Erdogan government in Turkey. His harsh criticism of Israel, his occasionally berserk statements about how he might invade Israel. The economic ties never fully collapsed, and really neither did the military ties, which used to be quite close. So there is a mutual interest, I think, in stability in the Eastern Mediterranean, not least around energy, but also deep distrust. Turkey's alignment with Qatar and political Islam complicates the equation. And for Israel, I think the goal is to manage that relationship pragmatically, cooperate where possible, especially in energy and trade, while hedging against Turkish ambitions in the region and hoping against hope that somehow Erdogan is replaced. A little bit of a mirror image, or reflecting in a way what I'm sure the Erdogan government thinks of the Netanyahu government. So in that regard, Turkey is sort of a little bit in the gray zone, and one major question is Turkey's ambitions in a new Syria. As was mentioned before, we don't know what's going to happen in Syria, and there's a scenario where Turkey's military is sitting on Israel's border, although I don't think it's likely. As for India, the relationship is much more straightforward and increasingly central. You mentioned the two democracies, Israel and Armenia. I agree, but there is a second issue, which is the two technology hyperpowers, and that's basically. And I know Armenia has completely justifiable ambitions, sort of in that direction, but I wouldn't call it a hyperpower just yet. But Israel absolutely is, and India, in a different way, more to do with scale, also is. So they share concerns also about Islamic extremism, in addition to the growing cooperation, defense, cybersecurity, agriculture, and also water tech. This is part of Israel's cautious pivot towards Asia, which also includes strengthening ties with Japan and South Korea. But this is a strategic counterbalance for Israel, especially the current government, which is at loggerheads with the West, important for Israel. Now, on Azerbaijan, This is a bit of a painful issue. Look, to talk to Armenians about, I'm very much following it, and I talk to Israelis in all political directions about it. And the basic fact is, Israel feels misunderstood about the problem it faces with the Palestinians. Israel feels like no one understands that if they just pull out of the West Bank, they're 12 miles wide at their narrowest point, and the Palestinian governed area would surround Jerusalem on three sides and would be looking down at Tel Aviv, and you can see the towers like from the West Bank. And if a jihadist government took over that area, that's a big, big, big problem for Israel. They feel misunderstood. So when they feel like a cornered animal, and in that kind of situation, they'll grab at any alliance they can, and Azerbaijan gives them a lot. Uh, this is rooted in strategic geography, shared interests against Iran. Azerbaijan borders Iran, as we know, and has long been a key buyer of Israeli weapons, including advanced drones. Enough said about that. Missile systems for Israel. This is a listening post vis-a-vis Iran, and a sort of a counterweight to Iran in the Caucasus. They also buy oil from Azerbaijan at advantageous arrangements. Of course, they know it raises ethical and reputational concerns, especially vis-a-vis Armenia, but not only, because Azerbaijan is one of the world's most extreme dictatorships, and it's not really disputable. And Israel seeks to present itself as a friend of the democratic world. But so far, Israel has prioritized strategic advantage over moral alignment, and that calculation may apply to a lesser extent, but maybe with the same bottom line, even if a liberal government came to power for a longer time than the last one. The best way to fix the problem is peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which I realize everyone's skeptical about. Conceivably, Israel could be a mediator. I wouldn't rule that out in some version of the peace process in the Caucasus.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I have one more question for Joseph, because to complete the round for all the three panel members, which is about the two-state solution, GCC, Abraham Accord, normalization with Israel, and is there a way to delink two-state solution from Abraham Accord and conclude the relations before the two-state solution has been reached, because these are two separate issues, each of them complicates the other part. And then we'll have a few questions from the panel, from the audience. Yeah. Thank you.
I will address the two-state solution option, but I just want to add something to your previous question to Dan Perry. There are no democracies in the Middle East, not Armenia, not Israel, not anyone else. I think we have to stop this charade. If you want to call participation, that's fine, I will accept it. But there are no democracies. What is going on, and frankly, to portray Israel as a victim at this age for a nuclear power, it's really unbecoming. Having said that, why I think that the two-state solution is essentially dead. There is no two-state solution. Let's grow up about this. Simply because Israel is not ready to live with the Palestinians. It does not accept them as fellow human beings living on this planet. It will be very happy if all the Palestinians were out of the way, and it's working to make sure that all the Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, and for that matter, elsewhere around the world, pick up their bags and move to Mars, Jupiter, or Neptune, I don't know where. But it doesn't want them on the same planet with them. Now, the GCC states have a solution, part of the two-state solution approach, if you will, but that's only a plan. There's no concrete policy to actually translate the two-state solution on the ground. They're talking the talk, but obviously you need a partner to negotiate with them on this issue. The Abraham Accords, it's just that, they're accords. It doesn't mean that the solutions are either feasible or doable over the long term. Let's remember that Israel and Egypt have had a peaceful accord for several decades now. But as we all know, it's a lukewarm peace. The peace is diplomatic between the two countries. They're not fighting, obviously, which is good. Peace is relatively secure on the border. That's also good, but it doesn't solve any of the socioeconomic problems that two countries have faced. The same with Jordan as well. So to end, it will take a few decades for the barbarism to end, for the starvation to end, and for peace to come back.
So for the first question, maybe we turn to Dan. I think it is about Israel and Azerbaijan, and then Talar. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would certainly not defend the Israeli government on anything other than the previous charges that it doesn't want the Palestinians to live on a planet. Slight exaggeration. But as regards the export of weapons, look, any weapons exporter faces a question of what limitations it should place on the use of the exported weapons, and indeed what kind of trade partners it chooses. And Israel, in this regard, has been, I think, very remiss in placing almost no limitations that are effective and choosing its partners without having anything ethical be part of the equation. I can't defend it, but clearly they do it because of the reasons that I said before. It's an extremely advantageous relationship because they get cheap oil. They have a huge importer of their weapon system. IAI is among the most advanced, plane refurbishing and drone developing companies in the world, and Azerbaijan is sort of like their test kitchen. But mainly, I think, it's because Azerbaijan provides Israel the forward base against Iran, and we know that Israel gets up to all kinds of activity in Iran in our efforts to stem Iran's project to become a nuclear state or a nuclear threshold state.
Thank you. Talar?
Thank you for the question. So I think there are multiple ways to help the community there. Definitely the government support through the embassies and as we know, the Armenian citizenship being provided to Armenian community members in that part of the world, especially in places where there are acute crises. But there's also the people-to-people kind of connections, the ability to support them in case they want to leave if they are in very dire circumstances. But also I would like to raise one thing that actually comes back to connects the instability to the stability. The human capital that we have in the Middle East, although has been decreased many folds, is still there, and we can look at them as soft power. Soft power in two ways. If they stay in their own countries, in the Levant or in Egypt and all of those places, but also because as David was mentioning before, there is a shift of wealth and GDP growth and economic growth from the Mashriq to the GCC countries. And together with this shift, there is a big shift in the human capital. So a lot of people who are graduating from universities from those Levant countries are actually moving and finding jobs in the GCC countries. A lot of them are Armenians as well. A lot of them have friends who are Armenians. So I think we should look at it in this way and triangulate, because I think that there is win-win situations again in this case, win-win in terms of the people and the members of the communities and Armenia itself. And I think we can, if we triangulate and we can use and put the human talent at the core of these ideas, we can actually create some type of stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Talar, and thank you all panel members. I think this is the time to conclude our discussion. Very enriching, and I personally also learned from you all a lot, although I felt I knew a bit about the Middle East, but it is constantly changing, many complexities, all contributing to make the other part also more complex even. And I think the only way we deal from Armenia's today's perspective is collectively to learn, to navigate, and look for opportunities and solutions. Thank you all very much.